don't have to take pictures because we're recording this whole thing. Pictures of me. The presentation is being recorded, and the files will be fully downloadable. Okay, and just so everyone knows, no copies of PowerPoint were hurt in producing this presentation. It was all done, contrary to what Mr. Blattner may have said, this was all done in InDesign, exporting to PDF X4, so you can actually print these things on an offset press and get actually exceptionally high quality. Okay, and I am worried about precision of character layout and everything. Okay, thank you very much. I have an awful lot of material here. Some of this material will be discussed further later in the day in a panel discussion. I'm going to try to basically get you thinking about certain things. Okay, we're going to talk about open data. PDF beyond just visual, beautiful content, the type of beautiful content you see maybe in this slide, but nonetheless, other issues. The challenge is basically combating ignorance and misconceptions. I didn't make up this piece of artwork. It's been floating around the internet for a while. The people continually tell you the PDFs are where data goes to die. And this is basically echoed around the internet. It's wonderful clickbait. You want to get someone, oh yeah, there's an article on PDF where data goes to die. And many times it's parroted by people with all sorts of issues. What sort of issues do they have? Some of them are very real, such as difficulty in getting data that they need, okay, and either in terms of availability or how it's delivered to them. Undue attention to some academics' ranking system as to what is good data or how to deliver data. User confusion and certain know-it-alls who don't. PDF versus the web formats boogeyman. We'll discuss that for a few minutes. I'm sure that could take a few hours, but we're not going to spend that. And a mistaken belief that PDF is a proprietary format, and in some cases amongst academics, an irrational hatred of Adobe and PDF because they didn't didn't invent it themselves. Okay, let's talk about this infamous Tim Berners-Lee 5-star ranking. I'm not going to go into this in detail, but basically his thing is basically ranking the suitability of a file format for data based upon certain criteria, one of which is basically he wants everything done via links over the internet, and really, if it isn't something that's what he thinks is a proprietary file format, let's say a spreadsheet with XLS, he'd rather you use CSV or something that an academic may have invented, okay? It ignores the reality that PDF can contain data files. It's not just for scraping, and we'll discuss that a bit more. And some questionable value judgments. It may be true that a Microsoft Excel file format may be much better for containing data than a CSV file, okay? Maybe you don't like Microsoft, but actually they have some good file formats, whether you like it or not. I think our challenge is really to tease apart these issues and provide data access solutions appropriate to our needs. Well, what's this thing about open data? This has started very much in Europe. It's basically the idea that data should be freely available, accessible to everyone, easily to use, republish as they want, without any restrictions for copyright, patents, or mechanisms of control. In other words, all data should be free. There's certain contexts in which this is of vital importance. Functioning of governance in a free society really requires that data used in that governance be available. In the United States, we have something called the Freedom of Information Act, and there's similar laws throughout the world. STEM research, if you're doing scientific papers and you're saying that based on the data of 10,000 left-handed herniated frogs that you have some sort of conclusion, you really want to be people who are reading the paper really would like to see that data, but you're not going to put that in the actual paper itself. Finance, certain financial data, especially for public companies, really fits under open data. And we'll also show some other examples as well. Well, what sort of issues do we have? What data qualifies as open data? Are there any intentional delays in releasing data? Releasing data in inappropriate formats. We'll give you an example. You ask for data on something, and let's say the value of real estate in a certain zip code in the United States. And what they do is rather than giving you the basic data file itself. They will print out a spreadsheet, scan it in, and make a PDF file and give that to you. How useful is that? Useless, actually. And so what do? You blame the PDF file? No. They should have given you the raw data right up front. That's what you asked for. That's what you should have been given. Okay? They don't need a final file format such as PDF. They want the data. Okay? In some cases, the recipient doesn't know how to use the data. Sometimes they need more data than they're given. And there's a difference between static blind exchange versus archival access versus dynamic access. What's something that you want as something permanent for the record, or something that's changing underneath you and you need to be able to follow that. And that makes a big difference in terms of how you present that to people. Okay, here's our boogeyman. Web formats. They're great for dynamic access to data. I want to know exactly what's happening now. A PDF file isn't going to give that to you very easily. Okay? It's great for dashboard applications. It requires online access and availability of all assets. In other words, it can't be that part of it's down, part of it's available only on odd Thursdays, whatever. You have to have constant and full access. The results may vary by browser. Contrary to what my friend Mr. Blattner said, I have 3-4 browsers on my system. None of them give consistent results with each other. They're all their own world, so to speak. And that's a real problem for people who are trying to produce things that are accessible to everyone else. The problem with web formats is things may change underneath you. And it's certainly not archival. But you want to see something right now, immediate access, this is perfectly fine, and it's probably better than anything else. What about PDF? Well, it is a container format, and it's primarily used historically as a final form file format. Say that real fast. It supports compressed file attachments and metadata. It has great potential for great static access to data. In other words, you have historical data and it's not changing, and you have to follow that change to, on a per second, per minute, whatever basis. It is based on international standards, not recommendations. ISO standards. We have a number of people in these in this conference these 2 days who are involved with these committees, including myself, Leonard, Matthew, a few others. It's amazing how many are involved with that. We have standards for the overall language. We have standards for archiving, printing, etc. Okay, what about hybrid solutions, where basically you have some initial access to a data-laden PDF via the internet, and then once you've downloaded it, you're totally self-sufficient. That works quite fine, but it's not going to give you dynamic access. A PDF file accessing external data via hyperlinks, you might as well just use HTML for that, because what's happening, it's changing underneath you, and for the most part, it defeats the purpose of using PDF. I'm sure there are some good examples where it works well, but it's not what we're really going to talk about today. Okay, well, what about if you just use PDF by itself? And I'm going to be talking about that primarily because I only have a limited amount of time, and I want to give you some examples. There are two basic ways of getting data within a PDF file. One is embedded files, where in addition to that final form file format that you have, that beautiful stuff, you actually can embed files, and there's some methods of doing that. We'll give you some examples. The other is to use metadata and tagging. Okay, and there's differences in terms of advantages, disadvantages on this. Embedded files are much easier to implement. You click on the thing and bring up whatever can process that file. The problem with any sort of metadata and tagging is whatever reader you have needs to be cognizant of the context of that metadata and tagging. In other words, if you decide you want to use certain metadata to provide ways of graphing things, then every compliant reader that can deal with that has to have all that built into it. And things like that change so frequently, to me, that seems more like a nightmare. So something that'd be good for some discussion. Okay, practices that I have found will work well for PDF with any data, much less just open data. Okay, we're going to go to data as opposed to open data. Open data has a political context. I don't want to get into that. It turns out that if you use PDF A3 and PDF A4 when available, there's a capability of something called associated files. Using those in conjunction with something called attachment annotations allows you to get direct access to those attachments from within the PDF file. And I have some examples for you. Okay? You want to use standard formats for those embedded data files, using somebody's proprietary whatever. I mean, really oddball proprietary format limits the accessibility of that. You certainly don't want to embed executable files. How good are you at writing viruses? You want to check for viruses and exploits prior to embedding anything. You don't want to use hyperlinks to reference data external to the PDF file, because that defeats the purpose of having something that is available for archiving and for long-term access. And I would recommend you digitally sign the thing to make sure that going forward people have confidence that what they're seeing now is what you created back when. Okay, let's take one simple example where this type of thing has been done. There is a standard in Europe called, I'm probably going to mispronounce it, Zugford. Someone's going to correct me. It's now up to release 2. Basically, it's a specification by which you produce a visual version of, let's say, a business-to-business transaction, such as an invoice statement, and underneath it, you have an XML representation of that financial transaction. Okay? And the PDF that's being used is PDF A3. Surprise, surprise. Okay? It meets all the requirements that are in terms of getting everything into a single file. You can embed all data for further processing. If you're doing machine processing, use the XML part of it. Someone wants to understand what that is. Have you ever tried to figure out XML? Well, there are probably some nerds who are good at this, but try figuring out XML in terms of what it really means. And no, that's not simple. So it gives you the best of both worlds. Okay, and basically, you can attach other things as well if you want. One PDF A3 file equals one invoice. And let's give you an example of this. Beautiful invoice here for certain things. It's probably hard to read from this screen. You will be given a copy on the website. This file is downloadable, but if you go in Acrobat and look for the file attachments, we have this beautiful piece of XML, which is wonderful for machine processing, but not really for visual looks. But anyway, this has become not only a standard in Germany, but I believe France is also using a similar standard as well. Okay? No, so that's one example. It's actually being used now. Okay, let's take an example of something for consumers. Those of you from California have probably heard of a company called Pigs, Goats, and Elephants. They're very good at starting fires. I didn't say anything. Okay. Nonetheless, every month, consumers get a printed statement. That printed statement includes various advertisements, regulatory information on separate pieces of paper, plus a return envelope. You can download from their website a PDF copy of that statement. Okay, that's very important. This statement also contains billing information, but some limited historical information in graphical form, but not everything else. If you know where to look on that website, and it's not easy to find, you can also download other information about your account, historical information, how many kilowatt hours on a per hour basis, your payments for the last so many months, the number of the number of therms of gas, the natural gas you've used, and even all the attachments that were in your envelope. But it's not easy to find. Plus the fact that these statements are only available for a limited period of time. Okay, here's an example of what you get in the mail and what you can download. Looks sort of pretty. You want to get data out of it. Scraping it, and what I mean by scraping is trying to write a program to try to take that chart, for example, and figure out what that really means and make a spreadsheet out of it is an exercise in frustration. It's not going to work. It really is not a good way of doing things. Okay? Well, I decided to take the challenge and try to fix it up myself. I downloaded all those goodies from the PG&E website, and should I just attach them to the PDF file? Nah. I embedded them in those downloaded files as attachment annotations at appropriate locations within the statement's PDF file. I created a PDF A3B file via Acrobat Pro's pre-flight capability. Okay. Then stage 2, I put some explanatory text to indicate what those little paper clips that I had in there that were the annotation embedding annotations were, and then I also checked, am I still a PDF A3B file? Yes. I digitally signed and locked the file and then validated that I still had a PDF A3B file. Okay, this thing is golden for archiving and information, and let's get you some example of this. Okay, well, first of all, this was your original useless invoice statement, I should say, from Mr. Gustav Hunkeldinkle. And then I augmented it. Okay, let me try to make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. Okay. A little bit better? Okay, so suppose I want to see my monthly usage and billing. I put it in as a CSV file. I could have made it a little bit prettier, but this is exactly what came down to me from PG&E. In this case, it's every month, the kilowatt hours, the cost, etc. So I want to analyze, and I want to do, let's say, some type of solar energy conversion. This might tell me whether it's worth doing. Okay. What else do I have here? Well, I made an XML format. They made that available. It's probably somewhat useless since that's hard to read. But I also got the thing for natural gas. And that's good in terms of things such as I want to determine for my heating in the winter whether I might have enough insulation in my house. And you can see there's quite a bit of difference on a monthly basis how much natural gas I'm using. This is useful information. I can do what-ifs in a spreadsheet. I can't do it on the pretty visual part of the PDF file, but this is embedded in that PDF file. Okay. What else did I put in this particular thing? Okay, let's go a bit farther down. Second page wasn't too interesting. Okay. Consumption by day and hour. In this particular case, they gave me information as for every single day of the billing period, for every hour, what was my usage? This is useful information for a consumer. I'm just giving you one example. You can imagine any number of things where data could be put into a commercial document that can be analyzed, and it's not trying to fiddle around with the PDF content itself. It's something that we've embedded. This is useful information. Okay. Oops. Let's get back to... Okay. There was one other thing at the end of that sample. There was all the silliness that they gave us in terms of Other attachments. Yes, there were the regulatory notifications that they wanted to increase my bill. Of course, I can click on that and see the beautiful notification of hearings of how they're going to screw me for the next half year or two. Okay? So it turns out this is something that is a good example of what could be done. Now imagine if this utility just sent me or gave me a pointer to this augmented PDF file each month. I have something a lot more useful than what they send me in the mail or even what's initially downloadable to me. Yes.
Joe, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Do you think that companies like PG&E have any motivation to actually do that? I mean, you can do those.
If ultimately they don't have, they can make it. We can make it a lot simpler for them. Yes. By the way, just so I know, I'm not making any product announcements here. Okay.
Right, okay.
But nonetheless, this is something that could be rather useful.
Oh yeah, I mean, you could easily,
We'll try to hold. I'm sure we'll have time for discussion later on and in the hallways. Anyway. This is something that perhaps makes a hell of a lot of sense, okay? A lot more sense than maybe some other things that is done. Okay. In terms of, do we have to do anything for this? Every single thing, all this capability is currently in PDF and tools that are available on the market right now. We don't have to invent anything to add to do this, okay? And we can concurrently, in the future, both tag these as PDF A4 and PDF X6. So you can print it, you can view it, you can archive it, make mounds of coastal, everything. Okay? And by the way, all those attachments are zip compressed inside that PDF file. The difference in size between the base PDF file and that with this data is really small. Okay? We're not talking about large things. What about, I'll give you one more example since we have somewhat limited time here. One day I got a email from a member of RIT's faculty. He wanted to know how he could take scientific papers and somehow figure out the equations that are inside them. And of course he's saying, well, you have these pretty brackets and they're composed of multiple glyphs on top of each other, and how do you figure that out? And I'm saying, oh my God, that's ridiculous. Every font is different, every system is different how you do this. Does that make any sense whatsoever? Of course it doesn't make any sense. So scraping is not a really good way to handle that. What if we created the original document, making those equations available in some other sort of form that someone could take them out and look at them and evaluate them and copy them without worrying about which font was used as a computer Glurbish Modern Equation 24 or whatever it happens to be used underneath it. You want to be independent of that. So I decided to come up with an example. It's not as sophisticated as that which I have for the invoice. The invoice was a statement from PG&E is a little closer to me. But nonetheless, we had to come up with an example of this. Each equation's, what we attached was basically some metadata associated with this, and there could be many of these within a scientific paper, for example. But if you do an attached file, it's simple. Metadata, you'd have to know what that is. And I don't think you want every PDF reader to know how to handle polynomials. It just doesn't make too much sense. Okay, so the first problem I found was that they're competing formats, just like everything else. Some standards are more standard than others. There's MathML, there's Tech, there's other sort of proprietary formats on top of Word, etc. The question is, do we have multiple files or a single file with multiple formats for each equation? There's a difference between presentation format and context format. I'm still trying to learn the difference between that, trying to find specifications isn't so easy. But nonetheless, we can do this, assuming we get a consensus of the best format to use for embedding these. So what I did was an example using similar techniques as I did with the PG&E statement. I took a Microsoft Word document I found with some math type style equations, something I found on the internet, of course. I created a PDF file via PDF Maker, including the source file. I embedded the files representing multiple formats of those equations. I copied them in and out of the math type editor. I used the tech version, the MathML2. And in one case, I actually included an EPS file because someone was using that, so I showed we could do that as well. And again, a PDF A3 file. And to pull up an example of this, we have I'm not going to say a beautiful, let's make this a little bit bigger here. Beautiful sorts of equations. I want to see what this is. I have the MathML, I have the 2 different flavors of that and the text format for this. Okay, conceivably these can be separate attachments. Hopefully that community can figure out something that would be agreeable to all of them. It'd be 5 minutes. Thank you so much. I'm almost done. Okay, so nonetheless, it can be done here. This is another community. Conceivably, if this scientific paper had the 10,000 herniated left-handed monkeys or whatever, and we had data for that, that could be in here as well as the equations relating to their herniations and their left-handedness and whatever, and you could apply the equations to that as well. Make sense? Hopefully it does. Okay. Okay, summary. I can do this in less than 5 minutes. PDF does offer excellent opportunities and features to contain, represent, and deliver final form, not only visual content, but also the underlying data in readily accessible, usable processes formats. Those solutions are available now. We don't have to invent anything, and PDF is absolutely not where data goes to die. Thank you very much. And I know this afternoon we'll have a panel discussing some of this, and probably get hot and heavy. And you can certainly contact me with questions. I'll be here for the next day and a half. Thank you so very much.
Sure.